What's up guys, Coach Az. Today we're going to talk about a real common problem that people have, and that's getting on the inside of someone when you're sparring or when you're fighting. So especially as a beginner, especially when you fight people who are more experienced than you, the thing that you're going to find really frustrating is you just feel like you can never get close enough to hit someone. At least not close enough to hit them without first eating a hit. And while sometimes, you've got to take a hit to give a hit, it's obviously not the ideal situation, and we want to find ways of getting on the inside without taking any damage, but being able to give damage to our opponent. So today what I want to do is I want to give you 3 things to go away, think about, and start implementing into your training to help make it easier for you to get closer to your opponent whilst not getting hit in order to hit them. Tip number 1 is enter in behind your sword rather than behind your shield. Now, typically what you see when people are trying to close the distance is they'll bring their guard up and then they try to move into range. So they focus on moving in, obviously, with their footwork to close the distance. The problem is that's the equivalent of walking in with your shield up into an opponent. The issue is that you're in a defensive mindset but moving forward. It doesn't give your opponent anything to think about or deal with other than timing you as you come in order to hit you with their shot. Now, if instead of coming in with my shield raised, I came with my sword in their face, they would have to think about what they're going to do about the sword as well as the distance being closed by me approaching. Now, depending on whether you're boxing or kickboxing, Muay Thai, your sword is going to be one of your weapons. So take, for example, a sliding double jab. You're coming in with footwork, but behind a technique. So you're giving the opponent something to deal with as you try to close the distance. This, of course, could also be a kick, say a sliding kick with your lead or your back leg, or just a roundhouse kick off your back leg coming forward. Anything that once you've thrown it would result in you moving forward, but obviously the technique itself is there as something for your opponent to deal with. So in terms of implementing this idea into your training, train more of your combinations and techniques moving forward. Typically, when we do pad work or bag work, you'll see people working stationary. They're standing on a spot, they're planting their feet, which is all good for technique and everything. But the problem is it doesn't necessarily always translate to sparring, where when you try to throw something, people move. So we want to be able to throw our techniques moving forward, backwards, out to the angles, off to the sides. We need to make sure that our techniques work whilst we're on the go. So take, for example, here training on a freestanding bag, I'm starting outside of range and I'm working my techniques moving forward, and then I can practice a combination of once I'm on the inside, once I get close enough to my opponent, and that just helps me to simulate the action as how I'd want it to be working within the fight. Tip number 2, get your head off the center line. This is another real common mistake I see with people coming forward. Even if they do come in behind a technique, they keep their head on the same line that it started with. This becomes really easy for your opponent to time and to judge and then to counter against. Remember, a moving target is far harder to hit than a stationary one. Now, although your head might be moving forward, it's staying on the same line. So visually to your opponent, nothing changes other than it approaching them and getting closer. A smart fighter will make this read. So they'll watch this happen a few times whilst moving backwards and notice that every time you attack, your head stays on this line. And then eventually what they're going to do is they're going to slip to the outside of your shot and they're going to throw their punch blind down that center line, knowing that your head is going to be there. And that's how you end up getting countered when trying to move in. Now, the fix for this is pretty simple. You need to practice techniques whilst taking your head off the center. So what might be throwing your jab while stepping out with your foot, or leaning your head off the line while shooting your cross. In particular, I'm referencing punching techniques. This doesn't so much apply to kicks because taking your head off the line to kick is not something that we probably would do moving forward. Maybe once you're in on a combo, you might take your head off and shoot your roundhouse kick up to the head. But generally speaking, we're talking about throwing the hands, moving forward, but now also thinking about making sure our head is off that line. A lot of this can result in more unorthodox movements like stepping wider with the feet. I did a video a while ago referencing TJ Dillashaw and Dominic Cruz from the UFC. They're great examples of fighters who break a lot of the classic dimensions of how footwork and head movement should be applied, but really what it results in is their head is never coming in on that center line, and it makes them far more difficult to pin down and hit. Again, practice your favorite combinations, but at least with the first technique that moves you forward in into range, take your head off the line. Come back into the center and then work a combo. Again, I'm working on a freestanding bag, so this is what it would look like. And then break away, reset, and repeat. Finally, tip number 3, train your explosiveness. Athleticism matters, guys. It does matter how powerful you are, how dynamic you are moving forward. I have fought a lot of people where I think technically I'm superior to them. I've got better technique, I've got a better understanding of range and distance, but where they were just so dynamic and explosive, it just evened the playing field. It was a great equalizer of having great technique and just having pure unrelenting power. It's something that a lot of technicians tend to shy away from. They'll spend so much time working on their technique and working on their strategy that they don't really give any time and attention to just making sure that they're as athletic and explosive as possible. You can take everything I've spoken about previously and throw it out the window if you're just 3 times as fast or explosive as your opponent. If they can't react to you in time, if they're just not as fast as you, then none of that really matters. Now, a big part of that is just going to come down to genetics and what your predisposition is in terms of your training. But regardless, we can all work on improving our explosive power, which is going to help us with pushing forward and closing the distance on an opponent. I plan on doing a series in the near future about training with weights for power, but in the meantime, check out Phil Daru. He is the strength and conditioning coach for fighters like Dustin Poirier. He's got an amazing YouTube channel, which I will link down in the description box below, and he talks a lot about the strength and conditioning side of training for martial arts. But if you're looking for some simple exercises to get you started, plyometrics are a great place to start because they require no equipment and just a little bit of space. So take, for example, a jumping squat or a jumping split lunge where we're swapping feet each time we jump up in the air. Start mixing in more of these explosive movements, and if you've got access to a gym, start training for power with heavier reps and fewer repetitions, and you'll find that a lot of this power can be translated both into your footwork and also your technique to make it far easier for you to close the distance on an opponent. So there we have it, guys. 3 tips and tricks for you to work on in order to help you get closer to your opponent and land your shots. Remember, a lot of this will just come down to experience and training, putting yourself in those situations to practice. Make sure you got a coach around, maybe video some of your sparring footage so that you can watch it back and see the mistakes you make. See if you can identify some of the things I've spoke about today. Entering in behind the sword, taking your head off that center line as you come in, and generally training your athleticism and explosiveness to make it easier for you. Guys, if you've liked the video, smash that like button for me, please. Hit subscribe. We've got new videos coming out every single week on all martial arts related content, and I will see you on the next one.